For more on this, we're now being joined by Johanna LeBlanc, who served as a legislative director at the United States Congress and was the liaison to the White House Department of State. Thank you so much for joining us on World DNA this morning. I want to start by asking you, what would you say were some of the key highlights of Harris's and Walz's interview? How do you assess their position on fracking and immigration?
I think the interview that happened this evening here in the U.S. Was one that was highly anticipated by the American people, in particular the American voters and the international community. And I think it's an interview that was long overdue. So a lot of people just wanted to hear more about Vice President Harris's policy position. One, I believe that the interview highlighted her in a very positive light. I think that it shows that Vice President Harris is very relatable. And the reality is that here in the United States, and like many places around the world, if you are to win an election, the voters need to be able to connect with you. They need to be able to see you in a light such as they can grab a bottle of beer with you, they can have a glass of wine, or they can have some tea with you. And I think she demonstrated that whoever you are in America, and regardless of your socioeconomic status or your level of intellect, she can actually engage you and have a conversation. So that's good. Secondly, I think that she did a really good job at highlighting some of her policy proposals because many people in America were concerned about her position on various things. In particular, when you look at the wealth gap between the middle class and the rich, that gap is getting wider and wider. And one of Vice President Harris's proposal is that to provide a $25,000 tax deductible for first-time home buyers. And why is that important? It is important because here in America, one of the quickest ways to gain wealth is through property ownership. You purchase the property. It earns equity. You can take the equity out to purchase another property or do whatever you need to do, and you can build wealth that way. So I think that's good. And she also talked about providing child tax credit up to $6,000 for low-income families, which I think will help a lot because, as we know here in America, the cost of daycare is rising. But ultimately, I think Vice President Harris focused a lot on the middle class, wanting to bring that gap a little bit closer versus how it's headed, which is much wider.
Right, Ms. LeBlanc, you do touch upon the policies that she spoke during the CNN interview. During a speech at DNC, Harris did touch upon what she wants to do as the president, from easing economic burden on Americans to unleashing a householding boom. But she did not specify exactly how she would want to enact them. Do you think her interview today with CNN touched upon those points on the enactment of her policies, which has been one of the critical questions amongst the Americans, and perhaps was she able to convince the undecided voters as well?
Yeah, again, I think she did a really good job with the interview this evening. People could relate to her. And I think in terms of some of her policy proposals, some of it will have to go through Congress. So while it's important for the Democrats to win the White House, it is as equally important to win both the House and the Senate because they do play a role in passing legislation that ultimately she would have to sign into law. So if you are a president, but you don't have control of the House nor the Senate, it becomes much more difficult to get some of your policy proposals passed through and turned into law. Which is why, as you know, as the Democrats are knocking on doors for the presidency, they're also knocking on doors for Congress as well as for the House as well as the Senate. And another point that I would like to make is she talked about immigration to a certain extent. And as you know, immigration is an issue that is very nuanced, very complicated. The reality is that when it comes to the southern border, you have different categories of people coming to the southern border for different reasons. And under international law and even our domestic laws, those who are fleeing from persecution, are entitled to the asylum process in order to enter into America, parole into America. However, Kamala, if you are an economic you are fleeing from economic challenges from your country. Unfortunately, there aren't any laws that are on the books currently to protect you, and those folks, unfortunately, will have to be returned back to their homes of origin. So when she talked about law and order in America, that's what she was alluding to. Those who have the legal right to enter America under international law or domestic law will be allowed to enter. And those who do not meet the required qualification, they will be sent back to their home countries.
All right, Ms. LeBlanc, just to expand on what my colleague Raisha just asked you as well, we've already seen the sharp rebukes from Trump to the interview. You said that they have positioned themselves as a relatable candidates. But do you think Harris and Walz have been successful in perhaps positioning themselves as strong and pragmatic leaders?
I think Harris has, and certainly Walz, and I think it was a good pick by Vice President Harris to pick Walz, because there are people in this country, unfortunately, who will not vote for Harris because of various reasons. And one of those reasons is that she's an East Indian and Black woman. Unfortunately, America still has a race issue. So I think Walz will be able to attract middle America to come to the table and ultimately vote for a Harris and Walz ticket. So that was a great choice. Unlike the choice by Mr. Trump, I think his pick for vice president has been disastrous. I don't think that it was a good decision by the party to have selected Vance, but I think Vice President Harris and her team did a good job.
Our last question to you, Ms. LeBlanc. How do you think the Republican camp will be viewing this interview today? Because latest polls now suggest that Harris is surging ahead of Trump with a margin of 5%. So 48% for Kamala and 43% for Trump.
Yes, not only is she surging in the polls, but people are giving money to her campaign at unprecedented numbers here in this country. And not only that, it's one thing to get money from corporate America, which VP Harris has received, and still have candidate Trump. But what's more important is the amount of money that is coming from individual voters, right? So if you're a corporation and you're giving, let's say, $100,000, you only have one vote, regardless of how much money you're putting into the campaign. However, if the average voter is putting in $5, $1, $10, $20, know that that voter is going to be committed to voting for that candidate when it's election day on November 5th. So you see a lot of single donors given to the campaign, to the Harris campaign, which is good. But another issue in this country is, yes, it's good to give to the campaigns. It's great because the candidates, they need the support, the financial support, so that they can gain more visibility. They can hire and attract some of the best talent on their team so they can win their election. But here in this country is that several years ago, we have a Supreme Court case, United versus FEC. It's a law that pretty much made it legal for corporations and PACs to spend unlimited amount of dollars into any given campaign in this country. So I think that in order for America to safeguard its democracy, it has to overturn that United Citizen versus FEC Supreme Court case because there's just too much money going into American politics that are influencing the candidates' position and what they ultimately do when they are in office.
Right, Ms. LeBlanc, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights.